Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be reacting to a video called Island Hopping, a bit of France closer to home. No idea what island hopping is. I have to admit I've never heard of this term in my life, and so I'm excited to find out. Hopefully they'll explain it. I have no idea what does that have to do with France. They are going, I don't know, it's like island hopping. You're hopping on different islands, but I have no idea what that could mean with the country of France. So hopefully we'll find out. So let's check it out and comment, like, and subscribe.
Island hopping is a passion for Connor Knighton. The smaller the island and the more unexpected, the better.
Oh my, what's happening?
When France won the 2018 World Cup, this was the scene on the Champs-Élysées. But over 2,600 miles away from Paris, there was a much smaller, but no less enthusiastic celebration happening on the small Rue Maréchal Foch. Inside of the one sports bar on the island of St. Pierre, French flags were everywhere.
They're French.
Waved and worn triumphantly, used to dry the occasional tear.
Oh my god,
it was a proud moment for all French citizens, especially for the 6,000 who live in a place most people forget is France.
Donc oui, nous sommes résolument français.
We are resolutely French, says Stéphane Lenormand, who serves as the president of the Territorial Council of St. Pierre and Miquelon, a small French territory which, based on its position on the map, might lead most people to assume it's part of Canada. Much of North America was once...
well, but also there's a part of Canada that also speaks French, so, I can see where the confusion stems from.
New France. But today, these islands are the last bits left. The French came for the fish.
St. Pierre exists and is still French today because of cod. It's really the main reason why people would come here. We have nothing else. I mean, if you look at the island, it's barren, almost no trees. You cannot grow that much things here. It was one of the richest places to fish cod in the world here. So you just had to have a boat and there you go.
Lauriane Detcheverry is the assistant director of the L'Arche Museum, which tells the story of St. Pierre and Miquelon.
Something that can prove that you are really in France here is the presence of a guillotine. Guillotine was the only legal way to execute someone in France.
You can't shoot them, you can't...
No, it's not legal.
Only chopping off their head.
Exactly.
Good to know!
The film The Widow of St. Pierre, starring Juliette Binoche, tells the story of the only time a guillotine was ever used in North America. The islands didn't have their own, so after a murder conviction in 1889, they asked to borrow a guillotine from Martinique, thousands of miles away.
That's so close to these days.
For months and months, the convicted prisoner just hung out and waited for the arrival of the only weapon that was allowed to kill him.
Well, that's awful. Is that based on a true story?
Over the years, the islands have had quite a violent history.
So we changed hands many times. Quite often the city was destroyed and the population was deported.
For over a century, the islands passed back and forth between France and England. But the French kept coming back, and in 1816, they settled for good.
In a way, St. Pierre is a new world. It was a place where you could, become rich.
The most lucrative era in St. Pierre's history came entirely by accident. During Prohibition, St. Pierre became a bootlegging hotspot thanks to its proximity to the United States.
It's not having to do with fish.
Prohibition was the best thing that happened to us. Really, we did nothing to have it, but it was such a good idea for us, People made so much money.
In more recent years, the economy has struggled. The once plentiful cod started to disappear, and in 1992, a moratorium on cod fishing in the North Atlantic all but shut down the once booming fisheries.
Ça a été un moment très difficile pour le territoire.
It was a very difficult time for the territory, Lenormand says. It took almost 20 years to recover and to rebuild. Today we have a fishing sector, but we are developing tourism. Tourists Richard Baum and Cheryl Rodness came to visit St. Pierre from New Jersey.
Now, logistically, from New Jersey, what's easier to get to, here or Paris?
Oh, Paris.
Much easier.
Non-stop from Newark.
For Americans, to St. Pierre and Miquelon can involve inconvenient flights and ferries.
Yeah, how do you even get there? That's a good point.
But the couple thought it would be a blast to spend Bastille Day, France's national holiday, in a place so unexpectedly French.
I like it. I
Here,
like it.
The wine flows freely. There's dancing and face painting. The locals play games of pétanque. Everything from the sausages to the ice cream is paid for in euros.
Merci beaucoup.
They're paying euros?
And any lingering doubt that you are, in fact, standing in France is gone the moment you step into one of the bakeries. The fresh baguettes and cakes are just as delicious as the ones you'd see sold in Marseille or Bordeaux. For locals, this is their way of life. For visitors, it's why they come to St. Pierre and
Of course.
It's a chance to get an authentic taste of France
Without living...
on this side.
Yeah, without living the continent. Okay, this is very interesting. It wasn't what I was expecting. I had no idea, but it was like, oh, okay, it is actually, it's a tiny island. I had never heard of it. I really do like it. I think it looks very pretty. Now I want to visit it as well. I think it's funny that, when they were like, oh, the tourist couple, it was like, they were like, oh, what's easier, to go to Paris or to come here? And I was going to say, well, Paris, because obviously it's further away. You're from Jersey. But it's like, no, actually, like, it's easier to go to Paris because it's like you go to Newark to the airport and then you're one flight away and you're already in Paris. And it's a good point. How actually do I get there? It's in the middle. It's in Canada, but it's an island, right? So I would guess you have to take a flight to Quebec or Montreal. I don't really know. And then you would probably have to take a ferry, maybe, and probably they are not, they don't leave from the city that the actual airport is. So you would probably need to go get by airport and then you have to take a car or a train or something and to get you to a city that actually has the ferry that you actually go here. So it is kind of like, it looks like a hassle actually. I think maybe it's not that, well, no, because there are islands that have airports, usually bigger islands have airports, but usually islands, I think the smaller islands, it's a bit harder to actually get there because usually, you can only get there by boat and there's a bit of a hassle situation happening. Not all of the islands, but I think some islands are like that. So I think, at first glimpse, it's like, whoa, what? But it's like, oh, no, actually, it makes sense if you think about the logistics of it all. And obviously Paris and France in general, of course, because they get a lot of tourists, like they get tourists constantly and they're used to, of course, it's easier to get to Paris. You can get to Paris from, I think, almost any airport in the world. So it is actually quite easy. Like, you just get there and that's it. But to an island, well, and to this tiny island that almost no one has heard of, well, of course, it's going to be a little bit harder. But it's like, I love it because it's like a taste of France, but in this, like this, on this side of the Atlantic. I loved it. I actually was quite surprised learning about the fact that they also pay in euros because it was like, wait, I don't really know, like Canadian dollars. I think that's the actual, like that's the money, that the coin they use in Canada. So I was expecting, well, they're going to use that, right? It's like, no. They use euros because it's technically like French territory, if I'm understanding correctly. It is like one of those other islands, like Tahiti, for instance. I think it's also like a French island that's French, but it's not technically mainland France. So I would guess this is similar. Like they have French passports, like the citizens of this island. Well, the citizens of this island, the natives to this island, they have French passports, I believe, and probably obviously they vote on the elections for like the president and all the other things that France does politically. They have a say in that. Again, if I understood correctly, they don't really have anything to do with Canada. So they don't really use, like, they don't have Canadian passports. They do not vote on Canadian elections. Like, they don't really do any of that. Because again, that's what I think, right? Especially if they use like the use of the euro, it's like, of course, because they're technically, they're French actually. They're not technically, they are French. It's just the fact that, they're not in mainland France. That's the difference. But it's like, okay, I would like to see. I would like to, like, I wouldn't know, there was a very short clip, but I would have loved for them to actually have spoken with, like, the more residents of the island, not just, like, the woman that was, like, explaining the whole thing. It was very interesting, but I think I would love to see it, to like, hear the perspective of, like, the actual other citizens of the island and see, because I'm guessing, because it's a tiny island, I don't really know the population, but I'm guessing most, if not everyone here, is probably has been like their family has been on this island for 100 years at least, because it's not a town that maybe it's not like, I don't know, a lot of people want to move there. I think maybe in the future or like in recent past years, maybe probably people are probably, oh, they're learning about this like beautiful place and maybe they want to move there. But I think probably most residents, it's like, no, my family has been here for, 200 years, 150 years, because it looks like, yes, they were probably like descendants of like, I don't know, French, and even probably they weren't even French back in the day, but like they said a lot of like, and even less probably like the prohibition was like what, 100 years ago, around 100 years, and it was like a lot, apparently that was like the economical like boom, and a lot of people want to move there because yes, they were trafficking like liquor, and maybe a lot of the residents that moved there, they just saw an opportunity, and they weren't actually French or anything, they were probably Americans that actually saw an opportunity, and they were like, oh, we want to be rich, so we're gonna move there. And probably the descendants are the people living here these days. And of course, after like two generations, whatever, after a couple of generations, of course, they're going to consider themselves, like they're not considering themselves. They are. It's like, no, we've been living here for a couple of generations, so we are French. But I don't know if they consider themselves French or they consider themselves Saint Pierreans. I don't know what to call them, but I would have loved to have spoken with like, I don't know, an interview with one of the people there, because it looks like, I don't know, it looks very interesting. And also, what do they do in terms of like economical, like for jobs? Because like they said, the island is trying to like be a bit of like a touristy place these days, and I can see why. I think it has like a lot of potential. But do they have like, how many schools do they have? Do they have a college? What do people do? I'm guessing they have, a couple of schools, stores, obviously. But what do people actually do for a living? I don't know. I think I find it interesting, like how people live their daily lives. And of course, I love the fact that they had like all the French desserts and the French pastries. They had baguettes. So probably they have croissants. They have all of the French or things that we actually associate with France. And you can see even they had like dance. They were dancing, and I'm guessing those are like probably traditional like French dances as well. So it is like, yes, I can see like the tourism aspect and how it's being exploited, and probably they can exploit it like a bit more in the future, because it looks very pretty. I think it's quite funny, because it's like you can see the whole like, I don't know, like the landscape. They were like, it's bearing like not a lot of people, not a lot of like nothing grows here. There's not like, it's probably a harsher climate, and I can see that, I understand it, but like it's pretty like to look at. I think it's very beautiful, but the weather, and at least from what I could see in the landscape, it reminded me a little bit of something of like the East Coast, like something like Cape Cod, not specifically that, but sort of like it's like a bit of like, it was giving me a lot of like East Coast vibes, and so I can see why it's a touristy place. But it's like you can see the sort of like the East Coast influence, but then it's French actually. So it is like, what a trip, what a weird thing. It's like people speak French and everything's French, the culture is French, but the landscape, it's not Paris at all. So it is like, or even a French town, because it doesn't even look like a French town. It looks like an American town. So it is kind of like, oh, that's so like weird. And maybe American, not as in the United States, but more like the North American continent. That's what I mean. But this is very interesting, and now I want to read up more about this, and now I want to go visit as well, because it makes me very curious to see like what, I know there's other islands that are like that, like Martinique and I think Guadeloupe as well, but I think they were all again in the Caribbean. I hadn't heard of like a place like this existing, in North America. So now I want to go read up on it, and probably, I want to go visit as well. But that was it for today, and I'll see you soon. Bye!